Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. I'm Mike Coletta.
And I am Tyler Osby.
And today we're going to go back into the id Software game, talk about that. Little Masters of Doom by David Kushner. That's the book we're using if you're curious. But we were kind of in the middle of chapter 10 when we left off, and Tyler is going to go into that. You know what I mean? We're getting into some really cool new stuff here. So
yeah, it was chapter 10 was a really long chapter, so we're going to cover kind of the second half. At least I'm going to cover the second half of that. And yeah, this book is so good. I love it. So here's where we're at. The boys have just accepted a whole bunch of money from GTI to start making Doom 2 a retail product. I think it's kind of funny because Doom 2 wasn't that big of a departure from what they had been doing. The book notes that it was a continuation of the model they had pioneered in the years before. Commander Keen and Wolfenstein both started as shareware. That's where they give you the first 2 levels for free, and then they ask you to pay for the rest. Then after those games were released, they put out sequels that were boxed retail products. So all of the other Commander Keen games, and then Spear of Destiny for Wolfenstein were like you went to the store and bought it. There was no shareware involved. Doom 2 was going to be that. So Doom 1 was shareware. Pay for the rest of the levels. Doom 2 was going to be just retail, no free version, no shareware. And Doom 2 wasn't a huge departure from Doom 1 in technology either. Now, I'm sure there's somebody out there who can nitpick this and tell me why the Doom 2 engine is different from the Doom 1 engine. I don't know. But Doom 2 was largely the same as Doom 1 with a couple of new weapons, and that's pretty much it. It just had 32 brand new levels, which is awesome, and people love playing new levels for Doom. But keeping the tech the same meant that Carmack could just kind of let his money roll in while he worked on the next big thing. And we'll get to that a little bit later, though.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah. Well, and even before we get to the next big thing, he spends a lot of time doing some side projects of like porting Doom to Super Nintendo. Well, did he? I can't remember if he did the Super Nintendo port, but he did the Jaguar port.
Yeah.
He did a couple of ports, maybe the 32X port too.
I think he might have worked on the Nintendo port, though. I think.
Yeah, that's the one where they like hired somebody to do it, and then they goofed on it.
Yeah,
and so he ended up having to do it.
It was the burger guy. Was it Burger Bill?
Yeah, Burger Bill. That's right. With the burgers that he kept in his desk for days. Mm-hmm. Gross.
Yeah, that's nasty. Yeah. You don't want that guy hanging out. His burgers are rotting in the drawers of his desk. Gross.
Yeah, but that deal that they'd struck with GTI meant that they were all officially rich.
Yeah.
They were just rolling in the money. So they did a lot of philanthropy. They gave back to their communities and some of the people that had lifted them up in the past. I think Carmack gave money to outfit a computer lab for his old school, and Romero did some stuff. And there was another person that bought a house for his mom, I think. So like they were spending their money not just on themselves, but they were kind of spending it on themselves too, because the thing that they were all sort of crazy about outside of games were cars.
Yeah.
And so they all got sports cars. They all got these really high-end, cool sports cars. Now, the book kind of goes into detail on like what kind of cars they got. I'm not going to pretend to know anything about what they were, so I'm not going to list off what they bought. But they bought some pretty cool cars with that sweet, sweet Doom 2 money. I think both of the Johns bought Ferraris. That's about as detailed as I can get.
We could do a new podcast called Brodex History of Cars. Do you want to do that?
Brodex, a history of automobiles, a history of sports cars.
Yeah, we could do that though.
But yeah, so they got some Ferraris, so I guess that's cool. Like that's a name I recognize, I guess. They also, Carmack especially, but they all sort of modded their cars too, because they're tinkerers and they're tech guys who like to get the most out of the things they own, which is perfectly on brand for Carmack, who just can't leave it alone. He can't just like get something, and especially something like technical, and just let it be. He needs to like go out there and upgrade it and optimize it and take it to the next level. And you know what? I can respect that. Cars aren't really my thing, but more power to him. I get it.
I wonder what he'd do to my Kia Soul. What do you think he would do to my Kia Soul? Put like a NOS tank in it,
Yeah. He did put a NOS tank in his Ferrari.
So I think that belongs in a Kia Soul more than anything.
Yeah. Get like a twin turbo engine with extra horsepower.
Sweet racing stripe,
The racing stripe definitely adds at least 5 miles per hour. Everybody knows that.
Easily. We're car guys, you and I. So.
Yeah. Yep. You and me, car guys, to the end. My Mini Cooper, real fast.
Real quick.
Can haul a lot of gold in the back.
A lot of gold.
So at this point in time, Doom was taking off big time. And what was cool about that was the mods that were starting to come out for it. So remember back when we talked about engineering the game so that the community could kind of modify it how they liked? Well, it turns out that was a great call. Wolfenstein had been modded by the community a little bit, but it wasn't really built that way from the ground up like Doom was. But with Doom, they put the toolkit out into the world, and Doom fans were making their own Doom games. Like they were just like making their own games, which was pretty sweet. And the guys at id were able to kind of check them out. So the example that the book uses is a Star Trek mod that someone had put together for Doom. It was really fun. Everybody there loved it. And it also justified their decision to architect the game in that way. There were going to be so many more games based on the Doom engine. And the real stroke of genius here that I think is that you could not mod the shareware free version of the game. Only the full version had support for mods. So even if you had no interest in Doom, but you wanted to play like the Barney version of Doom or whatever, you had to buy Doom. So id made money off of that, right? Which is pretty cool. So all of those fun mods coming out in the 90s, id was kind of indirectly making money off them by selling more copies of Doom.
You know what I realized? This is going to be a little bit of a sidetrack, but in mobile gaming, Nintendo did shareware. Because with that Super Mario Run game, they let everyone have the first like 10 levels for free. And then you had to buy the game.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, that is kind of that same way. I think a lot of mobile games do that now.
Yeah, I mean, for mobile gaming, I think it's pretty common, but Nintendo did it on mobile, which is just like,
yeah,
it's crazy.
Which Nintendo being on mobile is like kind of crazy in and of itself.
Yeah, that's already bananas. Sorry for the tangent. There we go. So here we
go. So yeah, they were kind of pioneers in that modding area. So before Doom, modifying games was kind of a destructive process. It's not that mods didn't exist before, but it was harder. Like if you wanted to swap out the bosses in Wolfenstein for Barney the dinosaur, you had to actually modify those files directly. And so like if you made the change, it was sort of permanent. If you wanted to go back, you either had to keep backups of the files you modified or just erase it and reinstall from scratch, which is tedious and kind of a turnoff for people who would otherwise be really interested in modding games. It just was like, now you've made this like permanent modification to your game, which is probably not really what you're going for, especially if you're wanting to like try out a bunch of different mods. So, but what Doom did was they took that and they made it possible to include new data to replace other data in a non-destructive way. So mod developers would pack their mods into a WAD file, which is WAD, which stands for where's all the data. And then when you launch Doom, you could point it at a new WAD file that would make it that would sort of do that replacement in real time for you. So this made modding so much easier. They also included the tools necessary to make levels and things like that. And these were the tools that id themselves used. So you know they were good. You can make good levels with those tools. Basically, they knew the community would want to modify the game, and so they supported it and they encouraged it, and eventually it blossomed into an awesome community full of free modifications for Doom. And that's just wonderful.
It's a beautiful thing. I really I thought this was genius,
Yeah. I remember back in the day playing a Batman modification for Doom, which was kind of cool. You were throwing batarangs and stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was actually hoping, I wonder if these Doom mods are still around for people to play. They got to be, right?
Oh, yeah. I'll talk about that in a minute here. But yeah, there's definitely, that scene lives on today. But not everybody in the company at id was on board. So to some of the more business-minded folks, they saw this as giving away the recipe to the secret sauce. What if someone tried to sell their mods or included some of the Doom stuff with the things they were trying to sell, and it might end up competing with themselves against the technology that they made? But Carmack didn't care. He was like, dudes, and this is a direct quote, I bet, that I'm making up right now. He's like, dudes, we made a ton of money already. We're not going to lose much off of this. To him, the freedom itself of allowing people to mod games, that was the end. That was what it was about. It wasn't about money. It was about creating free software that people could use to make their own stuff. And it was kind of noble work in and of itself, regardless of the money made for it. I'm a huge fan of this. I love using open source software wherever I can, because I love the community aspect of building something together and then releasing it for anybody else to use for any reason. I just think that's so cool and is one of the best examples of the way computers can work and just mankind in general, right? Somebody builds something that solves a problem for them, they put it out into the world, maybe it solves a problem for other people, or maybe it doesn't solve that problem perfectly for other people, so they start making their own modifications to it, and before you know it, you have this really robust piece of software that everybody has contributed to, and I just think that's really, really cool.
Dude, I use open source software software to edit this very podcast,
Yeah, and I'm using open source software to record it. I think we're using the same open source software, Audacity.
Well, yeah, I use Audacity to edit, but then I also, there is a university made a thing called Levelator that levels your audio for you, and it's open source. It's from I forget what college made it, but it's great. So good.
It's awesome. I love it. It's for the love of the game. Soul skating. Also, big kudos. Soul skating. Big kudos to the first person on Discord that gets my soul skating reference. If you can catch that, I will be very impressed.
I thought you just made that up as a thing. I don't get the reference, so I'm going to wait until someone on Discord says it because I can't. I'm not allowed to know.
I can tell you after the show. Yeah. I think this kind of stuff was sort of inevitable anyway. There was an alpha version of Doom that was given to the press as like kind of a way to hype things up, and it had leaked onto the internet. I don't know if we talked about that or not, but fans had already started making map development tools and other things to modify the game for the alpha version. So they might as well provide the good, well-tested tool. You know, if people are going to do this anyway, you might as well give them the right tool so they can make good stuff.
Definitely, yeah.
And even those tools themselves that Carmack had provided at launch were soon surpassed by what the community had put together themselves. So Carmack provided the initial tools. He didn't really give a whole lot of instructions on how to use them and how to tear the game apart and break it down. Well, a guy named Brandon Weiber did, and he created a utility called DEU, which stands for Doom Editor Utility. And it was hotcakes and gangbusters. It didn't sell like it, but it was downloaded like hotcakes and gangbusters.
Like free hotcakes and free gangbusters.
Yeah. Man, that would be a line around the block for free hotcakes and gangbusters.
Oh, it'd be so good.
Yeah. But it made it so easy to make a level that anybody could do it, which was awesome. Then came another piece of software called DHacked. DHacked. It's like got some weird capitalization in it.
That is some weird capitalization, you know.
I think it's DHacked or DHacked.
I think it's just supposed to be DHacked, but the E in the ED part at the end is capitalized. So
yeah, because it's like Doom Hack Editor or something. It sort of is like a bunch of words smashed together. So, but that gave players even more tools to modify the game itself. So you could not only could you make maps, but now you could modify the game files themselves to like change how fast you move or change how much ammo you have or even more. I'm sure there's like tons of, it goes really deep and you can like make a lot of different stuff there. But yeah, with the release of all these tools, like hackers just kind of went nuts on Doom. If they've been addicted to the single player deathmatch before, single player and deathmatch. Sorry, there's no single player deathmatch. But now they could modify
yourself to the death.
Yeah. But now they could modify it to their liking and work on it forever. And they did. People still make Doom mods decades after it had been surpassed by other more technically advanced FPS games. Later on, in 1997, Carmack would release the entire source code of Doom for free so that folks could take that game engine and add on to it and make it their own. And they still use that to this day. There's a whole bunch of Doom-based games that use modified engines based on Carmack's code. These are kind of known as source ports. If you're playing Doom today, you're probably not going to play the original version. You're going to play some source port that has like upgraded lighting or like faster FPS or like modifications that just make the game easier to play now, because for as great as the game was in 1993 on modern systems, it's like the controls don't really hold up very well, so it's nice to play it in a more modern setup. But this was long, like 1997 was like after Doom 2 and Quake had been released too, so there wasn't like a whole lot of risk in giving away that source code. You still needed to purchase the game to play the original Doom 2. Like you got the code for the engine, but you still needed to have a WAD file to play the actual game itself. And if you didn't pay money for that, then you're a pirate who got it illegally.
Yeah. No one likes that.
Yeah. No one likes that. That is true. We do not condone piracy.
Except maybe your parrot, because you're a pirate. Your parrot's probably fine with it. But everyone else is upset.
Yep. Your eye patch is definitely okay with it.
Yeah. Peg leg's fine. Yeah. Hook hand. Makes it hard to operate a keyboard.
Yarr.
That's the next 30 minutes of this podcast is more pirate references. So everyone buckle up. Yeah. Here we go.
We're just going to describe pirates and their ships and how they have cannons. Okay.
Welcome to Yardex, the history of pirates. Okay, I'm done. You can keep going.
As the crew got started working on Doom 2, Doom 1, though, was a certified banger. It was selling like hotcakes and gangbusters, and I got so excited saying that I bumped my microphone. I apologize. People couldn't get enough of it. It was clear that they'd done something revolutionary, and so everyone wanted a piece of it. Larger development studios were making their own Doom clones, as they were kind of known back in the day, because first-person shooter wasn't really a genre yet. It was more like if you made a first-person shooter, it was just kind of a Doom clone. So that's what they were known as. But other outfits were trying to contact id to form some kind of partnership or another. Microsoft was a big...
Oh, sorry. We're actually going to get to that, because what's funny is... id makes their own Doom clones later, which we'll talk about in a bit too, which is really funny.
Microsoft wanted to use Doom to show off their upcoming Windows 95 operating system, which on its own was set to be pretty revolutionary. They were going to show off kind of the multimedia capabilities of it, which was pretty neat. But basically, the boys are basically rock stars. They're young, rich, and creative, and they had reporters swarming them constantly and people trying to get in on the action coming out of the woodwork. As the looming specter of the internet rose on the horizon, nobody knew just how far this whole thing would go. The controversies we'd seen earlier were starting to pick back up around the world too. Bans were being considered in other countries outside the US, and Brazil actually did it, which I think those kinds of things end up actually working out in favor of whatever it is that got banned. It's kind of the Streisand effect, right? Of like, now everybody wants it because we've been told we can't have it.
Oh,
so
yeah.
everybody goes out and buys it. And it's all over the news. Oh, this game is banned. It's all free advertising for it.
We should see if we can get our podcast banned somewhere so it's downloaded more.
Yep. That's a great idea.
It's a good idea. We'll start working on that on the Discord. Take it back to the brainstorm of the minds, you know?
But by the fall of 1994, those hearings that on violence that Lieberman had led started to bear fruit. The ESRB was starting to rate games on a voluntary basis. And you want to know what game was the first game to have an M for mature rating? Doom 2.
Oh, man. I was on the edge of my seat there waiting. I was so excited.
Yeah. Which I think really worked out for id and is probably exactly what they wanted because they weren't pulling any punches on Doom 2. All the blood and gore was part of it, and an M rating was not so much a warning or a keep away from this sort of symbol, maybe for some parents, but it was actually more of like proof that what they'd done had pushed the envelope and was only for older, cooler people. So those hearings as a whole had done that for the industry. So now that they had this rating system, games could feel free to push the envelope, knowing that parents would supposedly be able to make a good choice about the games their kids are playing. So M-rated games were an official mark that the game you had made was like edgy and cool and violent, right? Which was kind of important to anything being marketed in the 90s. Like that was just like the whole deal of being a product in the 90s. So id, at this point, needed a frontman, someone to face the organization, be the face of the organization, and be the face of Doom. And there was just no question on who it needed to be. It needed to be John Romero. This guy had grown his hair out. He was like all like heavy metaled up. Like this guy was out there. Like he was not shy. He was willing to talk to people. He had shirts made up for everyone at id to wear with the Doom logo on it. And then on the back, he had the words "Wrote It" written on it. That way everyone would know that they were the ones who had made the game. So Romero wore his everywhere, including a sort of like proto PC cafe called Austin Virtual Gaming, where a bunch of nerds had set up computers and then charged people to play Doom Deathmatch on them, which is neat. It's kind of like an early PC cafe kind of deal.
I wonder how long that business was open. I was wondering about that when I read it, like how the PC cafe in America was a pretty short-lived business, if I recall.
Yeah, there are some that still exist. There's actually one kind of up the road from me on Ventura Boulevard that has it's like in the roof of a bowling alley that is like an esports lounge, which is like kind of cool, I guess.
And that's where Tyler records his very podcast.
Yeah, that's where I'm sitting right now.
All of a sudden, you just hear screaming in the background.
It's probably there's COVID happening now, so it's probably not too packed. Yeah. But I don't know how well it's done, but it exists still. Last I saw,
that would be a fun question for Matt in Japan. Because I'm pretty sure in Asia specifically, like more PC cafes exist, right? Like more places like that exist. Correct?
Yeah. Definitely in Asia. I don't know about Japan specifically, but like Korea is all about the PC cafes, or they call them PC bongs there. I know that's big in China. A lot of players in those regions, that's where they mostly play their games from. And it's like they just pay to play games in a PC cafe, and they don't even have a computer at home. Like if they're not playing at a PC cafe, they're playing games on their mobile phones.
All right, well, I'm going to call Matt and tell him he needs to move to Korea so he can be Matt from Korea, and then he can give us a scoop from Korea. On it. Does that work?
Yeah, that works.
Just upend your life and move over here.
Yeah. So people started recognizing Romero and kind of swarming him every time he went out somewhere. And he kind of enjoyed the attention, he's sort of about that, which is why he was the perfect person to be their front man. He started posting, they all started posting like news updates for their fans, which kind of started out as like technical explanations, a little bit of behind the scenes stuff, but later expanded to include like kind of the gang's general hijinks, like stuff with their cars and stuff as well, like just them as people, which kind of gave the company an air about it that made them sort of cool and mysterious and like, just fun, I guess. Romero himself, though, was just as big a fan of the game as anybody was. He and Sean had been deathmatching all day and night, seemingly unable to get any real work done. So Romero knew how to talk to the folks that were basically worshiping him, which is kind of weird. But he treated them like friends, like equals. The book says, to the outside world, Romero was id. So he was the dude. Like that was it. Whatever Romero was doing, that's what id was doing. But his constant deathmatching and kind of rock star lifestyle meant that he wasn't getting as much work done like just at the office. So Carmack, at the same time, like I said earlier, he'd been doing a lot of kind of side projects inside id, mostly porting Doom to like various game consoles. But at this point in time, Doom 2 is behind schedule, and that was a real bummer. I think the plan was to have 32 levels, and Romero had only made 6 at the time, and he was supposed to make a lot more than that. And he kind of hemmed and hawed on it. He was like, well, I just spend so much more time on them because they're just so much better or whatever. But like ultimately, the whole thing was sort of behind schedule. And Romero had lost his focus. And not necessarily in a bad way, I think. He just didn't want to crunch. He had a wife and kids now. He didn't want these death schedules that they had been doing to put out like Commander Keen and Wolfenstein and stuff. He wanted to kind of coast a little bit on the game they'd made and done really well with. He wanted to license the engine out to other companies to make games so that they could just kind of take a break, you know? He didn't want to do any, he didn't want to keep making the games. But to Carmack, his life's work was the games, and at least at that time. And he didn't want to do anything else. So he retreated further into his work. And that's where we end chapter 10.
Yeah. And so John Carmack, like many people, okay, and I think we've all thought about this at a time in our lives, right? Loves the idea of a holodeck in Star Trek. All right. I think, Tyler, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Like everyone thinks about this, how cool it would be to have a holodeck. Well, at the age of the internet, the idea was this could finally be possible. Like, this is an opening thing. And like people at this time in their life were like, oh my gosh, we could do virtual reality. We could get us all done, you know? And to Carmack, the next game that would do that for id Software was Quake. And we mentioned Quake before because Quake was actually a powerful character straight from John Carmack's Dungeons and Dragons imagination. He was character.
Oh, the one that got.
Yeah, he had
the one that got imploded.
Oh,
the one that they ended the world.
He had a giant hammer. I mentioned that. Like, yeah. Like a Necronomicon cube, I think, something along those lines. But yeah, so. And they actually were trying to make a Quake game before this point. They were going to do it during the Commander Keen times, but they just felt the technology wasn't there yet. But now is the time for Quake. And they now know that because they had multiplayer in Doom, and that was so successful that they think the multiplayer could go to the next level in Quake. And Romero was just so amped at this idea because Carmack's like pitching this idea to the whole team, essentially. And Romero's so amped that he immediately goes online and says, hey, everybody, Doom sucks. Long live Quake, the fight for justice. That's our next game.
Like, just immediately goes and dumps on his old game.
Yeah, he just dunks on his old game and then just moves on. And this was a problem for the rest of the team because Adrian thought that Romero did this just for attention. But Jay had a problem with this because a lot of things Romero said in the past, specifically around the Doom launch, caused Jay to just get flamed by gamers, you know, because he's kind of their PR guy, their business side guy. If there was a community manager at id, he was the community manager at the time. And so all this stuff that Romero says makes it so Jay has to like put out these fires. So he tried to wrangle Romero in, and it kind of worked for a bit. And Romero's like, oh, I understand. Okay. And then like weeks later, he goes to Computer Player Magazine and he says, quote, Quake won't be just a game. It will be a movement.
Oh my gosh, dude. Yeah. I mean, it kind of was. He wasn't wrong, but like, dude, rein it in a little bit.
Yeah, he couldn't rein it in. So now the hype on the internet about Quake is real and it's all going. And this is actually right around the time that Doom 2 was just getting finished. So there's actually this really fun little story, like a sidetrack in the book about how late one night in the office, Romero is playing Doom 2, and he's like doing the thing where he can like run through walls because they just are testing the game and seeing how the level layout. And he's on the final boss, which is the Icon of Sin, is the final boss in Doom 2. Spoilers for a game from the 90s, but a real long time ago. But behind the boss is a secret room, and Romero sees it's his face. Like his face is in the game. And when you shoot a rocket into the icon of Sin at the end of the game, Romero's face changes and has like a gross mean face and it looks like decapitated. And this was added in by Kevin and Adrian without Romero knowing, and Romero found it. And so what Romero did to respond was there's backwards voices you hear when you're fighting the icon of Sin, and if you play them back, if you play those voices backwards, you hear, "To win the game, you must kill me, John Romero." So these are Easter eggs that are actually in Doom 2 if you check it out. But Doom 2 was released on October 10th, 1994. There was a press party at this gothic nightclub called Limelight, and the party was called Doomsday. And what they did is TSI Communications is a PR company that was hired by GTI, who, as we all know, paid it a bunch of money. And TSI Communications had a budget of $2 million to convert the nightclub into a mansion full of demons, essentially.
Ooh,
and
spooky.
This was the first time that mainstream press really got on board with Doom, because this is like the launch of the internet. Just 1 month before this, Netscape Navigator launched. Remember Netscape Navigator?
Oh, man. The memories.
Oh, memory lane. So this is a big time for Doom. And the press was finally like answering Jay's calls, and they want interviews with like people that play the game a lot. And so 600,000 copies of Doom 2 were sold to retailers for the game's release. That's how many copies were bought by your Best Buy. Well, this is the 90s. So like your Best Buy, but also your Circuit Cities, you know? You got yourself your electronics boutiques, probably, you know, more old stores.
Yeah,
that don't
software,
exist.
etc.
Yeah, software, etc. Stores that don't exist anymore. They all bought copies of Doom 2 to sell. Now, those were all sold out in a month, those 600,000 copies. They were supposed to last a whole quarter of the year. So,
dang.
Yeah, that's how good Doom 2 sold. So while Doom 1 was an underground hit among computer gamers, Doom 2 was a hit around the world and in the mainstream. And press, it's actually like press quotes in this book where they call it a virtual reality game. Even though...
Just because it was all 3D and so realistic for the time.
Yeah, because it was
like, wow.
so realistic. You're not wearing a headset, you're playing on a screen, but they called it virtual reality because their minds are blown by how real it looks with the sprites and everything. So now we got to enter a new character in our story about it, and his name is Duango Bob, a.k.a. Bob Huntley. He's 34 years old, and he made his money in the tech industry by creating interactive kiosks for gas stations in Houston, Texas. That was his whole business. But his whole company was sidetracked when the game Doom launched. Like, everyone in his office was playing the game late at night. His business partner, Key Kimbrell, was his business partner's name, and Key was told by Bob, "You must delete the game from all of the company computers or I'm firing you." And then instead, Key just changed the name of the file so Bob wouldn't see it. And then when Bob found out, he's like, "This game is that good that you would risk your career over it? Fine, I'll play it. I'll try it out." And so him trying it out is what changed his life forever, essentially. But
oh my gosh.
Yeah, Bob became obsessed with the online multiplayer that everyone loved. But at the time, online multiplayer for Doom was modem to modem, meaning you had to have a friend that wanted to play with you, and you guys contacted each other. There was no networked matchmaking. And Kimbrell specifically was like, we could do this on a phone line. We could make a server and have people essentially call in from their computer and do networked matchmaking. That's a very...
It'll find someone for you to play with.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very basic way to say it. I'm sure there's way more technological stuff involved. But Kimbrell did it in 6 weeks. That's how long it took him to make this. They made a server in Houston that people could essentially matchmake and play Doom with strangers online. Now, the only problem they had was getting a hold of id and telling them they had this technology. At one point, like most people that contacted id, Bob called the company and was completely ignored. So what Bob had to do was he called a PR person, okay, at that company I mentioned before, at TSI Communications. He called them. He's like, "What do I need to do to get into this Doomsday event so I can finally talk to the id guys?" And he kind of sweet-talked his way until the guy was finally like, "You know what? Fine. If you want to go to the event, fly up to New York and I'll get you in." And so he and Key got into a plane and they flew to New York and they stayed at a Holiday Inn. And they got to the tournament and the night of, the guy was like, yeah, you guys can come into the party, but you have to come in as like tournament players. Like, you have to pretend to be pro gamers.
Oh,
so
wow.
they essentially played Doom and immediately lost because they are not good. But then they were in the party. They put on these like Doom shirts. They were put on the party. They lost their matches. And they found Jay. Of Doom, the business guy at Doom, and he immediately ignored them. He's like, I am not interested in whatever you have to say to me. And he walked away. But they did manage to corner Romero. And I think in the book that they just walk up to him, they say, I have a business opportunity. Everyone can play Doom online. We have a network server. Just check this out. And they gave Romero a disc. And Romero tried the disc later on that night and immediately called Key and was like, we need to do this. And again, this is like Romero's excitement kind of thing. He's like the guy that gets super amped about everything, and he really had to convince the rest of id to do this, because the idea of matchmaking and running servers was 100% on id's radar. They knew that was something they needed to do. They just hadn't made it yet, to the point that the only person that really thought they should work with Duango was Romero. He's like, these guys did it for us, like, why not just do it? And Carmack was just like, this is just another distraction for Romero, but hey, you know what? It'll get something done, so whatever. And so they agreed that if Duango... okay, so I should also mention why they call it Duango. I realized I just completely skipped that part, didn't I? Duango is short for Dial-Up Wide Area Network Games Operation. That's what Duango stands for. I got so caught up in the Doomsday story, I forgot to mention what it says. So they actually named their company Duango after this point. And so id would get 20% of the revenue from Duango and people that would pay to use their service. So it essentially was a paid monthly service to use Duango. So what they did is they launched with the game Heretic, which is essentially a Doom clone sponsored by id, but created by Raven Software, who we talked about in previous episodes before. Romero kind of oversaw Heretic's completion. It's like a first-person... It's Doom, but with magic, is how I'll put it. It's like, it's kind of like, looks like think of if Skyrim was Doom. That's what it looks like. And it's all magic.
Yeah, that's a good description. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, it looks really cool. Actually, I watched some YouTube video of this game, and I was like, oh, that looks really cool. But that was the first game to launch with like Duango enabled on it. And that came out on December 23rd, 1994. And Romero actually called the Bob and Key right before he uploaded it, and this is his exact quote. It was, quote, I'm fixing to upload this. Do you think you can handle it? Because when it hits, it's going to overwhelm you guys. And he was 100% right. Because by January 1995, Duango had 10,000 people all over the world. We're talking people in like Europe, Asia, everywhere, Australia, playing on this one server in Houston. 10,000 people paying $8.95 a month. And now that meant...
a good chunk of change.
Yeah, it's a good chunk of change, but it meant that they needed to expand. And so what they did is they decided to use the power of franchising to make this happen. So Bob, Key, and a guy named Mike Wilson, who was actually a childhood friend of Adrian Carmack, went across the country. Like, they did a cross-country trip together to set up Duango franchises all over the United States. So for $35,000, Bob, Key, and Mike would set up a server in your home, office, whatever, and it would just start making money immediately. They'd just start printing money. So you give them $35,000, but you're going to make your money back pretty quick. So they set up 22 servers in 4 months this way. It was just as simple as this. Like they say in the book, they go to the person agrees, then they drive to Home Depot, buy all the parts, set up the server for the person, and then they leave with $35,000 in their pocket, which is
nice. And then the person who did that just sits there and lets the money roll in, and very quickly they make their $35K back.
Exactly. Yeah, because they're just a server. They just sit there and let people play on it. So, but Duango, I should say, wasn't the only ones rolling around in money at this point, because it was around this time also that the first royalty check for Doom 2 came in. And remember, like, early id, they're talking like they're getting $10,000, $100,000. That's crazy. The first royalty check for Doom 2 was $5 million.
Holy moly.
Yeah, the multiplayer online gaming craze was officially on. Romero and the rest of the world entirely sucked in. But there was one person that was not really sucked into this, and that was John Carmack. Because John had decided he needed to distance himself from the screaming and the yelling of the office. They mention it in the book that at this time, like, Romero and Sean are still like having screaming matches all day in the office while they're playing the game. And so John Carmack, to avoid this, started slowly arriving to work 1 hour later, and then he would leave 1 hour later. And he did that until his work shift was 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. And that's how he got to work in solitude on what eventually would be Quake.
Wow.
So,
and I imagine that he was like over the Doom stuff by now, because he had written, like, he was done with Doom a year before, and now they were releasing another Doom game based on his tech that he had made a year before. Like, he was, in his brain, that problem was solved. He was light years ahead. He's on his way to something new.
Oh, yeah. His whole idea now at this point is he wants to make a like interactive, fast-paced, real-time 3D gaming world that people can just jump in and out of. And that's what he wants to do. So he starts studying textbooks, reading college papers. Granted, like, none of this stuff can really help him, but they can kind of start his brain because he has to start from scratch. No one has done this before. And now he'd have to do this without John Romero, because John Romero has gone full-blown rock star guy, like face of id, you know? So Carmack is now programming. And it's actually in this point in the book too, they mentioned that Carmack has now realized he has completely surpassed Romero as a programmer. Like, Romero was like kind of, him and Carmack were kind of toe to toe, and they could keep up with each other programming wise. But now he's too distracted by the games he's made, and Carmack knew he needed to look for a new person to help him. And he found a veteran coder that specialized in graphics named Michael Abrash. And it's probably Abrash, actually, not Abrash. But
Abrash?
Yeah, it's Abrash. So Michael Abrash actually wrote the book that helped Carmack and Romero program their first games. So he's kind of the guy that helped introduce them to this and helped them out. And at the time, he was working in Microsoft in Seattle. So John Carmack flew up to visit his mom and then went and had lunch with Michael Abrash. And he's like, hey, I want to make a persistent online world that is completely 3D, that players can jump in and play a game and shoot from friends and then leave and come back. And Abrash was just like, that sounds amazing. That's exactly, you know, a project that I would want to be a part of. And then Bill Gates found out that id is essentially trying to take Michael Abrash away from Microsoft, and he had a meeting with Bill Gates, and Bill Gates actually was trying to get Michael to stay. He's like, you remember those like ex-Microsoft employees that like left for IBM, they'd come crawling back in like 8 months. He don't want to be that, because at the time Microsoft was very aware of id. Like you mentioned it in the last chapter, they were talking about having a Doom game come out for Windows to kind of show off Windows. But to Microsoft, like, they're just, id Software is just a little company in Texas. You know, they're not a problem for us at all.
Small potatoes.
Yeah, exactly. So they had this talk together, but in the end, Michael Abrash decided to move and uproot his whole family and move to Texas and work on the game. So now they have Michael Abrash and then John Carmack. They're going to start working on the Quake engine. Well, they need a new person. You know, they need a level designer, because it's very abundantly clear that Romero is just off in the clouds right now. And they actually had one already, because right before Doom 2 like came out, they actually found a guy. He was an auto mechanic, and I can't make this up. His name is American McGee. That is his name, American McGee. First name American, last name McGee. It sounds like an insult someone would say to like
American McGee.
Oh, look at American McGee.
He's like
over
famous now too.
Yeah.
He made there's an Alice in Wonderland game that he made that was literally called American McGee's Alice.
Oh, man, that's so good. It's such an amazing name.
Yeah.
American McGee, by the way, is probably a person that we need to do a whole separate thing on. But he never knew his mom. Like, I'm just going to give you a brief biography. Never knew his father, was raised by his mother, had multiple stepfathers throughout his childhood. He finally left home at 16 when his mother sold his house and left with his stepfather. There's more to that story. It's bananas. Read the book if you want to know more. But essentially, American McGee had been on his own since he was 16 years old. And he got a job at a Volkswagen dealer being a mechanic. And he kind of just always loved math, science, and computers, and he started working on his car, and that's kind of how he met John Carmack, and they just kind of hit it off and started talking about programming and cars, and they became friends, and he just kind of joined the id crew, and he found kind of a second home with id Software. Like, those were all guys he got along with. He also got along really well with John Romero. Like, they became like fast friends because he was also kind of a loud, boisterous guy, you know, like very open and outgoing. I don't know boisterous, but outgoing. So they all got along, and they decided that American would be a level designer. And he turned out to have like the work ethic of John Carmack, but the level design skills of John Romero. So he was a prodigy among it. Yeah, and he actually created more levels in Doom 2 than John Romero did. So
that's pretty good.
Yeah, American started working on the experimenting and research phase of Quake with John Carmack, which actually worked out really well for Romero, because Romero is kind of under the assumption that this is their process. Like, Carmack makes the engine, John Romero works on other stuff until the engine is ready, and when the engine is ready, we'll start, like, that's when Romero starts designing levels and everything. So while that was going on, Romero worked on other games that use the Doom engine and Duango. So he worked on Heretic, as I mentioned before, by Raven. He also worked on the sequel to that game called Hexen. There was another game called Strife that was made by a local group of developers that called themselves Rogue Entertainment, which is, we all know, is a studio. So he starts working on that. And that's kind of where we start to see like Doom making their own Doom clones, because I really feel like all these games use the Doom engine, and they very much look like Doom with other themes, you know, around them. Which is kind of what Romero wanted, because John Romero wanted to cash in on as much revenue as possible using the Doom engine. And he figured while Carmack worked on a new engine, it just should make money with the modding community, because there were so many mods out there that they were actually becoming a bit problematic. So Scott Barnett is a modder at the time. He makes a military realistic version mod of Doom called Marine Doom, and Romero and the gang are just like thinking nothing of it. But then that mod was actually used to like as a recruitment tool for the Marines for years.
Ooh,
yeah. So It's kind of problematic in that you're like using this Doom mod to like get people to join the military in a way. It's like kind of propaganda-y, I guess. You know, it's a little weird. And that's actually would be an interesting topic, because they've definitely used video games to recruit for the Army.
Oh, yeah.
The
Army put together a whole game. Like, America's Army was a game that they sort of made themselves to do that.
Yeah, I think that would be a really good episode, actually, if we did that one time. I'm going to put that on the old Listerino. So that was the first problem, was you're like, okay, this is some weird political stuff that people are using our game engine for. But the second problem is that exact fear that Kevin Cloud had that you mentioned about people selling our like game, but in mod version, that happened. The company was called Wizardworks. They made a collection of 900 user-made Doom mods, and they called it D-Zone. Capital D, exclamation point, zone. All one word together. And that collection actually at one point surpassed Doom 2 on the sales charts. So that actually happened. And this is exactly what Kevin Cloud feared, and he was afraid of when he talked about he talked to Carmack and Romero about it, and they didn't really worry. But it wasn't that big of a problem, though, because id's response was to make their own id-approved collection of mods, and that was called the Master Levels. And that would release alongside a version of Doom called Final Doom in a collection that was titled Ultimate Doom. So they kind of got back on the charts with it, because I'm like, yeah, you know what? That's their collection levels, but we're going to have our own id-curated mod collection, and we're going to sell that. And so that ended up working out. I should mention that this is kind of a weird time. This is 1995, and it's definitely a strange time for id, because Quake was floundering. There was really no organization and leadership going on in the office. Like, Carmack was kind of solo with American McGee. They're working on the engine and experimenting with the engine. While that's going on, Adrian and Kevin actually did some like random art. Like, they mentioned them doing like Aztec theme art and just different things because they don't really know what they're doing. Adrian got married also in 1995, so he was like distracted with his family life. Romero was working on other projects. He also had a wife and kid. Like, again, it's like what you talked about earlier. The crunch time aspect of the work was gone. So mid 1995, minus Carmack and American McGee working on the engine, was kind of at a standstill. The engine for Wolfenstein 3D in comparison took 2 months to make. Doom took 6 months to make that engine. Quake, it was 6 months. It was mid-1995, and there was no end in sight. And the new way that Jay would answer questions from fans like, when will Doom come out? I mean, when will Quake come out? It was just when it's done. That's the new answer. And that's where chapter 11 ends. They're just like, when it's done. It'll come out when it's done. Which is funny because I feel like on a lot of Steam pages you see, that is written in on a lot of like announce like,
when does it come out?
When it's done. Yeah. So
Blizzard has been that way too. They've been notorious for just being like, look, the game comes out when it's done. Sorry.
Yep. Sorry about that. You got to wait. So, but Tyler, what you been playing?
Well, I have been playing. I started up a free game that some friends have gotten into that came out just a couple of days ago. That is called Genshin Impact. It's like free to play mobile game, but it's also on PC. It feels like Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild with some action RPG elements mixed in there with some like gacha game mechanics because it's free to play and they got to figure out a way to get you to spend money. I've been having some fun with it so far. I'm really worried about what's going to happen when I hit like the paywall part where it becomes harder to progress unless I pay money, because I'm assuming they want to make money off of it. And so I'm worried the design will kind of suffer for that. But right now I'm having fun with it and it's free. So, you know, the only thing you got to lose is your time, and that's not valuable. I played the American campaign of Call of Duty United Offensive the other day, just so I'm like 2/3 through that game. I'm kind of on this like half-hearted adventure through all of the Call of Duty games, which is kind of what I've been doing it for like, I don't know, I've been kind of on and off for like 6 months probably, and I'm only as far as the expansion to the first game, so that tells you how well it's going. But I kind of want to play like the console ones, and especially Call of Duty 3, which is very interesting to me, and I kind of just want to play through them all. But
yeah, because Call of Duty,
so play a little bit of that.
Call of Duty 3 is right before we get into Modern Warfare, right? So that's like the last World War II Call of Duty game as we know it. So
yeah, and I find it interesting because it was the, I think it's so far, well, not the only Call of Duty, but it's the only mainline Call of Duty game that doesn't have a PC release. It's just like, if you're playing on PC, you've got Call of Duty United Offensive, Call of Duty 2, and then Call of Duty 4. Like they just skipped 3 on PC. So I'm like, it's one that I didn't play back in the day, so I'm like interested in that. Play a little bit more WoW, but since it got delayed, Shadowlands got delayed, I'm still on my anti-burnout campaign for WoW, so I'm still not trying to work too hard there. Otherwise, just been I've been watching a lot of League of Legends Worlds, the World Finals. Full disclosure, I work at Riot Games. I'm not trying to astroturf. I just really enjoy watching Worlds, so that's kind of what I've been spending a lot of time at night doing. North America has been performing very poorly.
To no one's surprise, though, right? I mean, that's
to no one's surprise. Yeah, I know. We all get excited every year.
Every year, we're like, "This is the year," and it's not.
This is the year. The gap has closed. But so far, not great. Otherwise, that's it. I think that's really all I've been playing. What have you been playing, Mike?
I've been playing Super Mario 3D All Stars.
Oh yeah, I put a little bit of time into Mario 64 there.
Yeah, that's what I've been playing Mario 64. I've decided I'm going to take it in order. I'm gonna do Mario 64. Yeah. I'm not going to go for like 100% completion. I'm just going to get the stars to get to the final Bowser. So I'm almost at 70, which I'm pretty sure is what you need to get to Bowser. And the last boss, I think, is 70. Because it's got to be in threes, right? And I've beaten 2 of them, so that has to be right.
Yeah.
The funny thing is I don't remember a lot of the secrets. Like, I remember in the back of the castle, there's like the courtyard with the fountain, and that is something. I just don't remember what it is. I think it's the ghost.
Oh.
Is it the booze?
Yeah, there's a whole ghost, the haunted house level.
How do you get to that? I don't even know how to do it.
You got to punch the ghost, but you have to like get around behind the ghost, I think, so he doesn't disappear when you look at him, and you punch him, and then he drops to the thing, and you jump in there.
Oh.
I think that's how you do it. It's been probably 20 years. So
but you know what? That sounds really right. I've actually discovered some accidental secrets that I never even did when I was a kid while playing, and I'm like, oh, this is crazy. But yeah, that's been pretty fun. I've been also playing Apex Legends with friends, and I've also quit WoW for now. I think my subscription's even going to be up in like the next couple days, which is unfortunate because I know there's some people that wanted to play with us on Discord, but
gotta be waiting for Shadowlands.
We did play Among Us with the folks on the Discord, and that was super fun. So we had, I believe, Zach was in there. We had Peter in there. We had Will in there. We had Matt in Japan in there. I got to hear Matt's voice in real life. That's exciting, you know? And then you were in there. It was super fun. Kelly was in there. It was so great. So great. So we had a really good time playing Among Us, and I learned I am not the space ninja I thought I was. That's what I learned. And we want to do that some more. So we're gonna play that more often. We're gonna try to play little fun games like that. And that's like $5 investment to play games with friends, and it's a good time.
Yeah, it's free if you want to play on mobile too.
I didn't even know it was free on mobile. Really?
Yeah.
Well, now
it's free on mobile, like $2 to get rid of ads. If you play on mobile, I think like between games they play ads, but it's like $2 to get rid of it. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I just bought the $5 Steam version of it, which is still fun, and I have fun with. But
that's good too, and there's full crossplay, so it's all good.
Yeah, exactly. So if you want to play that with us, you can join our Discord. You can join the Discord by either sending me an email to codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com, and I will send you the link. Or you can go to my Twitter profile @MeColetta, and I have it pinned to the top of the Discord invite. And you can just click on that, and then you can just join the Discord and look at everyone's sweet, sweet video game collections.
One game we didn't talk about that we were playing, we finished Halo Wars 2 together.
Oh,
we played both
man.
of the campaigns of both Halo Wars games just in time for ODST to come out on PC, so we got to start that soon.
We got to do that. Yeah, that's so fun. And I got to say, like, I think I told you this when we were done. We finished Halo Wars 2, and I was a little bummed there wasn't a Halo Wars 3. I feel like I got attached. I got a little attached.
We were getting into it. Yeah.
Yeah, not like it was like the most amazing game in the entire world, but as far as like baby's first RTS goes, I felt pretty fun. And we got gold on a lot of missions.
I like the storyline too, especially like the cutscenes in the second one are really good.
Yeah.
I kind of enjoyed the story.
The budget they spent on cutscenes in that game was bananas.
Boy.
Like for a game that I don't think a lot of people have played is it's amazing. Just do yourself a favor, go on YouTube and watch some cutscenes of Halo Wars 2. Yeah, that'll be fun for you.
It's all on Game Pass too. If you're a Game Pass subscriber, all the Halo stuff is on Game Pass.
Yeah, so that was really fun though, and I mean, I've been playing Ring Fit also, but that's not as much. Like I've only played it like a couple times because I've been kind of moving around a lot. So I'll be home this week and I'll play some more Ring Fit too. Defeat evil with the power of squats. That's what you do. But we have one email to read. Do you want to read the email or want me to read the email?
How about you read the email?
All right, this is from our friend Will. Dudes, Will from Texas here. Great episode. I love the discussion series episodes, and anything to do with hardware history is a 10 out of 10 from me. I am curious for your hot takes here. Who do you think won the 360, PS3, Wii console war? I think it is the only generation where a case can be made for more than two consoles, and I also think it doesn't have a clear winner, even though the Wii sold a ton of consoles. What do you guys think? Keep up the great work. P.S. I just realized I need to change my Gmail photo. They probably didn't even read that part, whatever. So, okay. 360, Xbox 360, PS3, Wii. Console war. I mean, I think like the Wii, not only did it sell a lot, it was also a cultural phenomenon. Like I remember being in like dorm room, freshman year of college. A guy on my floor got a Wii. We were playing Wii Sports like every night. You know, we were playing Wii Bowling, Wii Tennis all the time, Zelda, Twilight Princess. But I get like, because you want to give 360 and PS3 a shot. I'm kind of like it's almost a Wii hands down. But what do you think, Tyler?
Well, it depends on what your metric is. So if your metric is consoles sold, it's a Wii, hands down, no question. Wii outsold everything forever. It's like the greatest selling console of all time, probably. I don't know. But it definitely won in terms of units sold. In terms of like quality of games, which is much more subjective and therefore much more interesting to argue point of view to take, I think the early part of the generation was won by Xbox 360. They had some really good games. PlayStation 3 had no games from the start. And the Xbox was cheaper and like games generally performed a little bit better on the Xbox 360, I think. But as the generation moves on and PlayStation starts to come out with some really high quality first party titles, like the later Uncharted, I mean, the early Uncharted games are good too, but like the later ones are especially good. You got like Last of Us, all of those exclusives that the PlayStation 3 managed to pick up right around like 2009, 2010. That's where I think overall the PlayStation 3 wins. Like if I got to pick one today, if it's like, hey, out of all three of these consoles, you can only play one for the rest of forever, I'm probably picking the PlayStation 3 on game choice because it had all the multi-platforms, of course, but it also had some really, really high quality, more really high quality first party titles, I think, or exclusives at least. That's my point.
Oh,
that's
man.
That's where I stand. And they had those Kevin Butler ads, which were so good.
Yeah, I mean, that's just true. I forgot how many, there were so many iterations of the Xbox 360, like models, you know, like the 2 gigabyte arcade. I had the 60 gigabyte Pro. There was like there was the Elite was the one that came out later on.
Yeah, that came out after the Xbox One had come out.
Were there different models of PS3? I don't remember.
Yeah, they had a lot of models of PS3 because they had from the start they had the 20 gig and 60 gig versions with full backward compatibility for PlayStation 2 games. The 20 gig version didn't have Wi-Fi, it had like 2 fewer USB ports, and didn't have the memory card readers. Which memory card readers?
What are you even doing with memory cards? Get out of here.
The 60 gig version had Wi-Fi. It was like $100 more, so it had Wi-Fi, 60 gig hard drive, a few more USB ports, and the memory card readers. Then they had the slim one that came out, I want to say, in like 2009 or 10. But before that, even there were fat models that had varying levels of backward compatibility with PS2 games. Like after a little while, they released one that had less backward compatibility because they got rid of one of the hardware pieces they used for it, but still had some. That was the one that I owned. And then after the like 80 gigabyte version of the FAT, they just completely got rid of PlayStation 2 backward compatibility. And then for the rest of the PlayStation 3's life cycle, it never had PS2
that
backward
was a big
compatibility.
deal.
So they had the slim one.
When they got
it
rid
was.
Of that. People were upset.
Yeah, and I was super upset actually. It's why I chose to get the fat one that I did get. And then they had the slim one that only had 2 USB ports, which was fine because everybody was playing wirelessly anyway. And then they had a super slim version, which has a really janky like top loading Blu-ray drive that's like really strange. You should look up a YouTube video of like how this thing works. I owned one of those as well. That's what I use now for like as my Blu-ray player basically. But yeah, they had a whole bunch of models, same as the 360 did.
Nice. Yeah, I was wondering about that. I remember also PS3, you could put your own hard drive in, couldn't you? You could buy a hard drive and just throw it in.
Yep, you could just toss your own laptop drive in there, which was pretty cool. Yeah.
Whereas Xbox had the weird, terrible top-loading hard drive thing.
There were like strange hacks you could do to get your own hard drive in there, but it was like it was definitely a hack.
Worth it.
Yeah, I did it because I do those things, but it was. Yeah,
all right, so Tyler, your official answer is PlayStation, and my official answer
PlayStation 3
is Wii because I am just that much of a Nintendo fanboy at that time. Yeah, I'm gonna say
it. Yeah, it's a good call.
I mean, I remember like Wii being like, grandma's played it. Yeah. Actually, you know what? I think the biggest thing about the Wii that made me want it to be the console of the console war is all the YouTube videos of people throwing Wiimotes into their television sets. That's really what did it for me. That's what made it the winner. But thank you so much for the email, Will. We really appreciate it. As I said before, if you want to email us, codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com, join the Discord via email or my Twitter account. And then you could also follow Tyler on Twitter at SneakerElf, ELPH. But yeah. Oh, we also have a new channel in the Discord called Hot Takes, and it's pretty amazing. So we might do a Hot Takes episode where we go through the hot takes of our Discord. I think that'd be kind of fun.
Post your hot takes.
Mm-hmm. Post your hot and or lukewarm takes for us. We would appreciate it. But I think that's it for the day. Thank you so much for listening. And Tyler, want to say goodbye to everybody?
Yeah, goodbye, everybody.